give us a talk on his experiences at Iwo Jima. So, my pleasure to welcome John Fluckiger.
The word went out that my conversation would be about Iwo Jima. But I have to turn this around to the fact that how did I get to Iwo Jima in the first place? I'm going to talk about my military life, which began with the Connecticut State Guard from September 1941 to February 1943. I was a sergeant. We were on duty stationed at the Manchester Armory. We guarded the railroad bridge across the Connecticut River. I went to Cheshire Academy for guerrilla warfare school. I was also the news reporter. I walked to Springfield, Mass. To join the U.S. Marine Corps, but they would not take me. But I would try again. I did not say I had walked from Ellington, which was 18 miles, so I was pretty well pooped out. I volunteered through the selective service. I took my physical in Rockville, then was sent to Hartford. I was accepted for service. I was told I was going to the Army, and I said no. I volunteered to go to the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps was only taking 8 men that day. Someone was taken off to make room for me. I just made the low weight limit of 118 pounds. We went to Springfield, Mass. For the physical by the U.S. Navy, because at that time the U.S. Navy was in charge of the Marine Corps. The doctor said, "Had I not seen you before?" I said, "No." The next day we started out for Parris Island, South Carolina. After 8 weeks of basic training, I spent 1 month on mess duty, waiting transfer to Quantico, Virginia for artillery school. I now weighed 156 pounds, hard to believe, but I was pretty solid. Upon completion of artillery school, I was sent by train to Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California, to the headquarters and service company of the 14th Marines, 4th Marine Division. At Quantico, I suffered from ringing in my ears from the firing of the guns. I was sent to division sick bay for examination. I was told I had thin tissues on my eardrums. I was taken off the guns. I was sent to the motor pool and was assigned as a driver mechanic, which I wanted in the first place. I was assigned a Jeep and told to take it to headquarters and report to the sergeant major, and was told to stand by. I drove the battalion commander, Major Youngdale, from that day until I was discharged. I was also assigned a radio Jeep. The 4th Marine Division set new records on its first operation. It became the first division to go directly into combat from the United States, 4,871 miles. The first to capture Japanese mandated territory in the Pacific, and it secured its objective in a shorter time than that of other important operations. Since the attack on Pearl Harbor, I was on an LST, a flat-bottom scow, for 18 days. The code name was Operation Fleetlock. Roy consisted of a chain of 85 islands. Namur was very small, 800 to 900 yards. Both were heavy with about 52 pillboxes plus all winding trenches and caves. It's time to put my glasses on. And if some of you notice that I shake, I've had Parkinson's since 1960. And a few years ago I had a stroke, and I still think I'm in pretty good shape. After Roy and the Moore, we went to Maui, Hawaii, where the 4th base camp was located, 2,539 miles. In May 1944, the 4th Marine Division sailed from Saipan, 3,815 miles. Saipan was 3,750 miles from Pearl Harbor and was only 1,485 miles from Tokyo, within B-29 bomber range. This campaign involved 165,672 troops. The 4th Division had 21,618 troops. 800 ships were involved. D-Day was June 15, 1944. Saipan was bitterly defended. Pac howitzers, Pac 75 howitzers were set up partially in the water, firing high-angle fire to hit the enemy. We could not get off the beach to go inland. My jeep was unloaded. I asked the beachmaster where the 4th Battalion, 14th Marines Artillery was. He pointed a direction. A heavy mortar and artillery barrage was going on. I left my jeep and walked in. Found headquarters, was asked where my radio jeep was. I said, down on the beach. The major said, go get it, we need it. I went back through the mortar and artillery fire and I drove the jeep through it, for which I received a citation which I will read. For excellent performance of duty in connection with operations against the enemy of Saipan, Marianas Islands, from 15 June to 9 July 1944, serving as a driver of a radio jeep, Corporal Fluckiger, in a cool and outstanding manner, brought his vehicle through the heavy enemy artillery and mortar barrage to the battalion command post, enabling his battalion to install communications with other units. His conduct throughout was in keeping with the highest tradition of the United States Naval Service. I put the jeep into a bomb crater. I dug a foxhole nearby. I could not leave this position for 4 days. One night I felt something cross the back of my leg as I was kneeling. I pulled my knife out. I timed the feeling of my leg and drove the knife straight down. Heard a shell crunch. Held this position from about 2 a.m. until about daylight. It was a large land crab. They can cut a broom handle in half. I was very lucky. The commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion was wounded, so my commander was sent there to command both battalions. I became a runner messenger. Walking through the fighting, they would call and say, John is on his way, whenever I left and returned. When we moved artillery positions, my jeep, the old man, the radio operator, led the convoy. When the guns were in place, we went to the front lines. We could call fire directions. I would call for checkpoint fire, single gun, and bring in one battery at a time until fire for effect by all batteries was called. When we reached Marpy Point, the tip of Saipan, there is a cliff down to an airport strip. Hundreds of civilians believed we would torture and kill them. Mothers and fathers stabbed, strangled, or shot their screaming children. They hurled them into the sea and leaped in after them. After 25 days, Old Glory went up on Marpy Point. The first food, like bread baked by the Navy, was handed to me as a corporal to divide with 8 men. The cook stove was set up. The old man stood by the stove for 4 hours till all hands received 2 pancakes. I became ill with dengue fever with a temperature of 105 to 106 degrees. I woke up aboard a hospital ship. When the fever broke, I was taken off the ship and went into the island of Tinian. It softened all my bones. I went back to 110 pounds. At the end of the battle for Saipan, 13 battalions of 105s and howitzers and guns were set up on the southern shores of Saipan. 208 guns and massed fire against targets on Tinian. Planes and warships demolished most everything. On August 14th, we left to go back to Maui, Hawaii, 3,815 miles. We left Maui, Hawaii for Iwo Jima, 3,891 miles. D-Day was February 19th, 1945. Iwo was bombed from August 9th, 1944, 6 months and 10 days before we landed. On the December 8th, 1944, the 21st Bomber Command, based on Saipan, began with a 72 bombing marathon plus naval task forces. Iwo was important. We had to have it as a base. Iwo was 758 miles from Tokyo, 727 miles from Saipan, and 3,790 miles from Pearl Harbor. The super forts began their raids on Japan in the summer of 1944. The loss of planes due to forced landing at sea had been very high. There was no close base to land. By capturing the island, we had a base for the B-29s, and also fighter planes based on Iwo could escort the bombers. Japan had 23,000 troops on the island waiting in caves, artillery, and anti-tank units. Large stocks of food and ammunition. The enemy was ready and waiting with the construction of bunkers and blockhouses. The island was surrounded by submarines, surface vessels, and air attack. All the prior bombing would make one think much damage had been done, and yet formidable defenders had not been damaged. No way could we know, or by aerial photos, discover the caves that made the underground a fortress. The landing started with the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions, with the 3rd Division in reserve. When we first saw Iwo, it was a lump of volcanic ash and sand. There were no trees. The beach was not white, but black. Everything was wilted, burned out, colorless, and no water. Iwo was not to support life, but only death. Mount Suribachi at the southern tip of the island loomed like something out of an inferno. The island was shaped like a large ham, about 5,000 yards wide and 8,000 yards long. There was two airfields in the center of the island. Months, days, and up to the landing of the bombs and everything we dropped. Then it seemed the taking of Iwo would be easy, and for a short time it seemed so. The first waves met no signs of life on the island, no counterfire. The island was strangely, frighteningly quiet. The first waves of armored vehicles started to land, and then the Japs came to life from the sand dunes. Machine guns began to chatter. Dual-purpose land and air guns on the edge of airfield opened fire. From Mount Suribachi to the hills to the north, artillery fire combed the beach. This never stopped until the end of D-Day. Marines clung to their beachhead by their fingertips. The Japanese fought from trenches and half-wrecked pillboxes, nothing but well-aimed grenades, flamethrowers, and bayonets routed them. Every defended position had to be taken by total annihilation of the defenders. When you walked on Iwo, you sank ankle deep in volcanic ash. Trucks could not move. Seabees had to put down wire mesh so the trucks could move. The 4th Battalion, 14th Marines only had 4 guns that were operative, 7 having been lost with the sinking of the landing craft's ducks and 1 with defective sights. My radio jeep and I landed by a duck. When we were unloaded, I made it to a bomb crater. The jeep was not moved much, but was used for communication. I performed many different duties. On February 23rd, Old Glory was raised on Mount Suribachi by men from the 5th Marine Division. This sight brought tears to my eyes. The 14th Marines artillery fired 156,000 rounds of 105 and 155 artillery shells, an average of 5,000 per day. On March 19th, the last units of the 4th Division sailed from Maui, Hawaii, 3,891 miles. The division paid a heavy price, 9,098 casualties, 1,806 killed in action, a total of 10,904. Total divisions Iwo, 18,200 casualties, 6,800 killed in action, total of 25,000 men. On March 4th, we watched the first crippled B-29 settle down on airfield number 1. We now saw why many lives would be saved. 1,449 superforts landed with crews of 15,938 men. Army P-51 Mustangs were based on Iwo. My brother Albert was also on Iwo Jima with the 13th Marines, 5th Marine Divisions. He, like myself, was not wounded, thank God. The medals and ribbons I have are the Asiatic Pacific Theater Ribbon with 4 battle stars for combat at Roy, Namur, Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima. The Presidential Unit Citation with 2 stars for Saipan and Iwo Jima. The Navy Unit Citation Ribbon for Iwo Jima plus other ribbons. I traveled 25,154 miles on the water. Not good for a person who was always seasick. I was in the U.S. Marine Corps from February 22nd, 1943 to November 21, 1945. This is 33 months, of which 21 months were spent overseas. I was in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve from January 1948 to January 1951. This is only a small part of my service in combat. You will find on these tables, I have books from every operation on here, books that were written on Iwo Jima, books that were written on the Japanese called Flags of Our Fathers, and that was put together from all of the things that the Japanese men wrote on paper, and they made it into a book. Each one of these books you can look at, you can read. My book here is on the regiment, the 14th Marine Regiment. This book here is on the 4th Marine Division. I went to Alexandria, Virginia earlier this year to celebrate 65 years of Iwo Jima. And you'll find this book very interesting because I'm not the only guy in it. There's pictures in here, and I tell the story about, some of you may have heard about the Indian talkers that were used in the Marine Corps. Well, they were there, and when the ceremony of the afternoon was all over, the man in charge said, "We have a surprise for you. The Indians talkers want to do us a favor." So they came up by the microphone and they sang the Marine Corps hymn in Navajo. Wow. It was great. You knew what they did. This book is titled The Battle of Iwo Jima and the Men Who Fought in It. My brother and I are both in that book. And this photo shows the 4th Marine Cemetery that was on Iwo Jima. This sheet here shows in New Britain on the monument, there's 100 names of the men who died on Iwo Jima that were from Connecticut. And every name listed here is also on the monument. This is a curious thing. It looks like a piece of aluminum, but on Saipan we cut off hunks of Japanese aluminum from their airplanes, and of course we had a maintenance crew with us. They had a little workshop, so they cut them into sections and drilled a hole, and then we hand filed. I made this ring, and I got my initials on the top. I made this ring from that Japanese piece of that Japanese airplane. Over on this table, this picture here, this young man over here is a picture of my father, who was born in Switzerland. And this is his mother and father. And we can guess he was probably about 16 years old at the time. But that was a pretty good picture. This picture here shows me in '43 when I went into the Marine Corps. Look a little different than I did now. And after Saipan, we got back from Saipan, this is a picture of me after having dengue fever. My son looked at it, he said, "You don't look too good." Well, I didn't feel too good either. But you can look at many of these pictures. My discharges from the Marine Corps, my discharge from the Connecticut State Guard, and my citation. And I went down to, well, I skipped this. When we were on Iwo Jima, my brother and I, and the Rockville newspaper wrote, "Fluckiger boys in battle at Iwo Jima." So that became a piece of souvenir. The celebration in Rockville, Vernon, on VJ Day celebration, is a picture of my brother, myself, my wife's younger brother, and some of you may know Town Line Auto Body, Fran Wilhelm. He was on the battleship New Jersey, and he and I were great friends, and he was the best man at our wedding. So it makes quite a picture. This map shows you all the distances I talked about of all the campaigns. The state of Connecticut gave us all a ribbon award, and this is the paper that came with it, and this is the picture of me receiving. Over here on this table is a map of Maui, Hawaii, where our base camp was. These pictures over on this side of me were taken of various people in the camp. You will see a picture here with me taking care of a dog. Well, the colonel, when we left Maui, Hawaii, we boarded a converted aircraft carrier to come home. And down in the hole where the airplanes usually are, they made it all into canvas bunks. And I was up on bunk 11. Wow. And if you think for a minute that's fun, and all we said, "You guys don't make no mistakes now." But it was wonderful. This is a small picture of a parade. This is only one little part of the division on parade. All these pictures were taken in Camp Maui. I have a picture over here of myself and my sister. I was fortunate enough when I came home, she was at the house. And I have this other is a picture of myself and my mother. And this is a picture of the Iwo survivors of the state of Connecticut. You may browse as you wish, read what you wish, look at what you wish, and I hope you enjoy it. I'd just like to make one statement. I am lucky I am here today. My wife got up this morning with pains in her chest, and that's the third day that it's been happening. So I turned around and I said, "I'm not going to wait for you to decide." I dialed 911. The ambulance came and took her to the Manchester Hospital. And I called my son and his daughter, my son and his daughter came down. And they gave her tests, and they ended up calling her doctor. And her doctor said, she's going to St. Francis Hospital to have an angiogram to make sure there's no damage to the heart. And they call it angina, I believe is the right word they call it. Well, my son is going to come back he called my daughter at work and told her that Mom was in the hospital. And I said to Betty, what should I do? She said, let's go. But that's why I'm here. But my granddaughter stayed with her and was going to ride in the ambulance with her to St. Francis. My son's going to come back and we'll go to St. Francis, see how things are.
We thank you for being